Where'd the tunes go? What, am I live? We went tunes.
It's the most confusing countdown of all time.
Yeah. What movie is that from? Tunes. No. Someone will know. Chad always knows. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Live Before Lock Show, presented by PrizePicks. I'm Dave Loughran. Hit your boy up on Twitter at Laffy_D if you haven't done so yet, along with Greg Ehrenberg at Ehrenberg DFS on Twitter, breaking down game 2 of the NBA Finals. It's a good day to be playing some NBA DFS. Greg, after game 1, what are you expecting here? Excited for this one?
I mean, I am, and a lot of it is because I have a lot of money riding on the Suns. I have, Suns to win the championship, Chris Paul to win MVP. So really, like, my main rooting interest, even, outside of DFS, is, even if it gets to a point where late in the game, it's between my DFS lines for the Suns winning, I'm pulling for the Suns winning tonight. So that's really my main rooting interest. I'm just in there. I'm rooting for the Suns, and more specifically, Chris Paul to just absolutely go nuts.
Well, if they win, Chris Paul is going to have a bad series, or someone else is going to have an amazing series for him not to win the Finals MVP.
That's my favorite thing about having Chris Paul bets at this point, is the narrative is so strong behind him. Like, DeAndre Ayton has a big game, and the first thing DeAndre Ayton says in the post-game press conference is like, Chris Paul's maybe so much better. Same thing, like Devin Booker has a big game. He's like, yeah, Chris Paul really orchestrates the offense. It seems like no matter what happens, all the players just credit Chris Paul for it. Chris Paul doesn't even play. They win the games. Like, he was so good coaching us from the sideline. So yeah, it does seem like that's the way the narrative is going.
Sure. Look, the thing about MVPs is it's totally subjective, right? Like, sure, you can have some great stats and be the reason you win. But whenever it comes Super Bowl time, I'm always saying I'm voting for the quarterbacks 10 times out of 10 if it's 2 elite quarterbacks, right? Like, if Mitch Trubisky were to make his way to the Super Bowl, there's a good chance I'm not betting on him. But when you've got Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, come on, you could have definitely made it Devin White last year. You could have made it Damian Williams the year before. It should have been. But running backs don't win it, Greg. Defensive players have to have absurd games to win it, and usually not have GOAT quarterbacks. And I think the same thing applies to the NBA. Not in the sense that there's a quarterback position, but in the sense that, like, generally speaking, if LeBron's team wins it, he's probably going to win it, even if someone else had an equally good series. And with Chris Paul being in the finals for the first time in 16 years, it's a subjective award, and it's a feel-good experience to have Chris Paul win it. That's just the way it is.
And not to mention, he's also playing ridiculously well right now, throughout the postseason. And it's not like he hasn't dealt with injuries too. I know that a lot of people like to say, hey, the Suns have been, healthy. They haven't dealt with anything. And relatively, I guess that's true. They haven't had the same injuries that other teams have had. But Chris Paul, he's got a torn ligament in his thumb. He had the shoulder injury. He also missed time because of COVID. So, he's not playing at 100% either. Not that most people are at this point. Devin Booker had a broken nose, but still, I mean, it definitely seems like the wind is at the sail of Chris Paul.
What I'm saying, though, is even if he doesn't have a series like he's played over the past few games, or even like, he doesn't need to be perfect, is what I'm saying, to win it. Unless Devin Booker rips off 50+ points every night. Yeah.
So, like, even last game, DeAndre Ayton, had a ridiculous game. DeAndre Ayton finished with 22 points, 19 rebounds, played really well on defense. And still, after the game, it's not like the books massively move the odds of DeAndre Ayton to win MVP, because it's just not really a likely scenario.
Right. Why would they? Plus, Chris Paul dropped 32 points in 3 quarters. All right, let's dump into this. We got a bunch of topics on the left side. We got the Bucks. We got the Suns. Suns up 1-0, playing at home in front of, dare I say it, a ruckus crowd inside. Is it still Talking Stick Resort Arena, some ridiculous name? I'll tell you, these Phoenix Suns out there in the desert are stoked. So you've got to enjoy this. They're 4.5-point favorites. It was 5.5 earlier in the day. 221 total. That's come up about 1.5 points from 219.5. But before we do this, I must ask, hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. We're almost at 1,000 people watching, just a couple minutes into this. Going to try and give you the best possible show, best possible free content we can. The least we can do is ask. Hit that thumbs up if you enjoy it. Help us out. We got 1,000 likes last show, Greg. Josh and I got 1,000 likes, 2,400 concurrent. Just a ridiculous. And I'm not expecting a repeat of that. You know, it can get exhausting, but hit that subscribe as well. And if you want to join the team here over at Awesemo, that join now button got you covered right there. All right. So let's take a look at this series. The review, it's only one game in review, right? So not a whole lot happened, but one of the big things, I think, storylines between people that actually enjoy basketball and not just the casual fans is how do the Milwaukee Bucks stop the pick and roll from the Suns? Because that was destructive last game. You saw DeAndre Ayton put up, you know, one of his best overall scoring totals that we've seen in a long time, finishing the game with 22 points. And Brook Lopez only played 23 minutes. You can't bring Bobby Portis in to be that stopgap. Do you run Giannis at the 5 for an extended period of time today?
Maybe. I mean, one of the things too is we were talking about this a little bit beforehand is, you know, Brook Lopez ultimately only played 23 minutes last game, and his minutes in the second half were not as great as his minutes in the first half. So if you're looking at the trends of that, you know, you might say there's a chance that Brook Lopez plays not as much today. The only thing that gives me a little bit of pause and just assuming that's going to be the case is the same thing happened in game 1 against the Hawks last series, where game 1, Brook Lopez played 20 minutes. And then going forward in that series, he played 23 minutes, 25, 29. And then, you know, Giannis got hurt and then he's playing close to 40 minutes per game. But a very similar thing happened to where Brook Lopez, not only did he play limited minutes in game 1, but he barely played in the second half of that game. And it just didn't have all that much bearing on his playing time going forward. So while I think there is a chance they could play more Giannis at the 5, like ultimately we've seen from Budenholzer, he kind of just reverts back to what his normal rotation is.
Got a couple super chats, just really nice ones, deciding to be charitable or gratuitous, however you want to say it. And I appreciate you guys. Steve C says, super chatting before the show even starts. This was before the show. I'm just getting to it. As I know this is going to be the best thing I've seen all day. Thanks, brother. Much love. Teddy T with the nice chunky super chat there. Running out of games. Just want to say thanks to you guys for a season of info, help, and laughs. It always feels good, Greg, to see that stuff.
Hey, listen. If we helped you guys have a good season, thanks. And you guys helped us too, right? Because like what Loughran and I aren't going to be doing a show for no audience, right? We're not the ones who are liking it 1,000 times ourselves. Maybe Josh, right? He might be the one making bots and they're running up like he might be making bots that are running up the like counts. So he can feel better about himself. But in general, you know, it's not us on the show that are liking the video. So definitely you guys help us, you know, be able to do these shows and have a career.
How amazing would that be if Josh, like when I ask for likes, has a downvote bot and he has one. So when he asks for likes on the same show, has an upvote bot and just makes it look like he's crushing it.
Listen, I would be more surprised if that wasn't the case than if it was the case, if we're being honest.
So I'm with you though. It's hard to predict what's going to happen, but the reason I bring that up, going back to this Brook Lopez thing, is like you have to deal with probabilities here. And a lot of times you're dealing with very low likelihood that something's going to happen that can be the reason you win. I mean, that big chop in the Millie the other day had Bryn Forbes with 7.5 points in and not the optimal, but in the winning. I don't know what the optimal would have been. Maybe it was that, but in the winning lineup. And I think as you look through all of this, we have to look at certain spots that may actually break a certain way, even if it's only a 1 in 10 games type of thing. Now, I'm not saying like, okay, we need to predict that Chris Paul is going to get hurt in the first quarter, or, you know, you need to predict that Devin Booker is going to be in early foul trouble. But as far as rotations go, I think it's always interesting to see how teams mix it up. And the way I see it is I do think a lot of it's game flow dependent. I mentioned this to you before the show. Could be wrong. But if you go down very early and you're getting cooked and Brook Lopez is the culprit, I don't think Mike Budenholzer rides it out. But if they go up by 10 points in the first quarter and things look good, even if he's somewhat of a liability, it's not the reason you're losing, you're actually winning, then I think he stays out there. So I could see this going one of a couple of ways.
Yeah, I mean, there's only 2 ways it goes, right? Brook Lopez plays a bunch of minutes or he doesn't. To me, I think it's more likely that he plays his normal minutes than he doesn't. But yeah, I mean, of course, Budenholzer could switch it up a little bit. But the thing also is, I don't know where he would go to switch it up in a way that would be significant, so that there's any one player I really like. Like, what is he? All right, PJ Tucker goes and plays, 36 minutes or something like that. And, PJ Tucker's in play, but, it's not like PJ Tucker is the great value play he was earlier in the playoffs when he was almost min price. We have PJ Tucker now on DraftKings is priced up to 4,600. On FanDuel, PJ Tucker is 7,500. So it's not like there's a crazy amount of value here. And he's such a poor fantasy producer that, I don't think that he's going to be a guy who's going to score, 25 fantasy points or anything like that and break the slate.
Neither do I, but could you not see him going smaller and seeing more minutes go to Connaughton or Forbes or something like that, even if it's an additional, several minutes apiece?
Connaughton's already playing a ton, though. So Connaughton played 28 minutes last game. Connaughton other games in the recent games in the postseason. So here's the last 5 games, Connaughton's minutes: 28, 30, 21, 26, 32. I don't think there's that much more ceiling for Connaughton. I can't see him playing, like 34 to 36 or anything like that. And also, he's a pretty weak fantasy producer for the regular season, 23 minutes per game, 16 and a half DraftKings points. So it's not like Pat Connaughton going out and playing, a couple extra minutes. I don't really think that would really change his outlook all that much.
There's probably not a lot of meat left on the bone there. Bryn Forbes would be, if he was a beneficiary of additional minutes, would be a game changer there. Like even if he went from 10 or 12 to 16 or 17, that's a pretty significant difference given his dirt cheap price point.
Yeah, Bryn Forbes at 1,800, who I think is in play already as is, just because there's a bunch of high end guys to pay up for.
Sure.
Yeah, Giannis.
And he was in the Millie Maker winning lineup last time,
and he barely did anything. Like you said, he scored 7.5 fantasy points, which is going to happen a lot in these finals games. Just because if you have the top end guys, right? If Giannis goes out and scores 55 fantasy points, Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, Devin Booker, if those guys are all scoring around 40, and then same with Holiday and Middleton, then there just isn't that much production going to other guys. And that means that somewhere a cheap guy has to get into the mix. And considering none of these cheap guys are likely to play a whole bunch of minutes, then it just becomes, all right, whichever cheap guy scores the most fantasy points. And last game, it happened to be Bryn Forbes scoring 7. And that's enough to be optimal. So, Bryn Forbes, Jeff Teague, even Frank Kaminsky, all these guys can end up playing, some not significant minutes today, but, playing around 10 to 12 minutes. Of the group, I do think that Bryn Forbes is the best play.
So do I. There's not going to be a ton of value down there. And yes, I saw the questions, the comments. Jordan Klein, producing the show, is actually adding another topic over here that we'll get to in a minute. Dario Saric, not a lot of minutes, but we've got to account for every lost minute and gained minute that there is in these rotations when you get to the postseason, particularly the finals where you have really short rotations and really short benches. But let's break down some of these studs first. So, at the top, and this is kind of a weird one because you have Giannis, you have Booker, I'm going to include Holiday and Ayton in there, just given that their prices, Holiday specifically, has seen his price come down from last game. So is Middleton now that we know Giannis is healthy. But Giannis, Booker, Chris Paul, Ayton, Holiday, Middleton, there are several players here, 3 on each side to be exact, that are all viable captain spot pieces today. And if you look at our ownership, which was updated, I think an hour ago, let me make sure that we don't have a more recent update here. Okay. Still an hour. The ownership going in the captain spot to these guys is 5 of the 6 are double digits, and Ayton is right below 9%. So outside of that, it falls off a cliff, Greg.
Yeah. And, at the high end, Giannis is picking up a whole bunch of ownership. And I was going back and forth with somebody about this on Twitter the other day about who was the best play on the last slate, kind of even like regardless of production. I mean, I guess that kind of has to be taken into account at some point also. But I said in hindsight, the best play, even if he wasn't the best points per dollar play in the last game, was Giannis. And the reason being, look at his ownership now compared to his ownership from last game. Last game, Giannis only ended up with around 30% ownership on both FanDuel and DraftKings. He ends up in the MVP spot on FanDuel. On DraftKings, it was Chris Paul who was in the optimal lineup as the captain. But Giannis was the difference maker at only 30% ownership in that spot. And there's never going to be another game in this finals where Giannis gets that kind of ownership unless he gets hurt again. So to me, Giannis, rightfully so, is picking up the most ownership in the captain spot. But it's going to be pretty hard to differentiate with him in that spot also. Yeah, I think so as well. At the MVP spot as well. We'll get to this in a second, but Giannis is at 40, or I'm sorry, the MVP spot on FanDuel, Giannis is picking up around 43.8%, which is pretty significant. And before I forget, ownership projections are free today for NBA. Usually they're behind paywall. We rotate free content every day to give you a look behind the glass. And this one is totally free today. If you go to the NBA drop down at awesemo.com, you'll see ownership. Make sure to go down the Showdown single game. I'm questioning what to do with Jrue Holiday. We actually discussed this before we got started. It's really not a great feeling when you're looking at his rates
with Giannis on the floor this postseason compared to Giannis off the floor. He is a 0.9 DraftKings point per minute guy in 204 minutes with Giannis on the floor this year. Assist rates at like 19%. Without him, it's around 39.5%. Usage rate falls through the floor. Everything for Jrue Holiday. And of course, his price point is definitely more acceptable than it was before, but he has just simply not played well in games that Giannis has played. And outside of a couple games, he's been a sub 40 fantasy point producer in like 90% of his last 13 games, I think it is. I wrote the deep dive today. I can't remember the exact number, Greg, but Jrue Holiday has been a middling option at this price point. Yeah,
I mean, still, if you look at his overall production, he has been pretty consistent though. So, take out the games where Giannis got
middling.
Yeah, but it's still, it's been, mid to high 30s fantasy points. What I think a lot of this is going to come down to ultimately with Holiday is probably going to be him versus DeAndre Ayton in terms of who scores more fantasy points, because I think that's going to be a decision a lot of people make when they're kind of priced around the same. I have Holiday projected for more fantasy points than Ayton. It's certainly, a little bit concerning that his production goes down when Giannis is on the court, but the same goes for Chris Middleton. Middleton isn't the same fantasy producer when Giannis is out there. So, I do have Middleton project for more fantasy points than Holiday, but it's not by a crazy amount.
Where do we go to with Middleton as well? That's another one. I know Josh was talking earlier today when he ran the optimal, it was 5-1 Bucks Suns, and it was Giannis, Middleton, and Holiday all in the same lineup. So, you have these big, quote unquote, big three in the Bucks rotation, in the Bucks starting lineup. And outside of that, it all kind of falls apart. You have Tucker, you have Bobby Portis probably plays, low teens in minutes. Connaughton's getting run, but he's not exactly the most productive. And then Bryn Forbes, Brook Lopez, who knows what's going on there. Like, how comfortable are you with all three of these guys in the same lineup tonight, which would result in probably only one of the big Phoenix Suns from Ayton, Paul, and Booker?
It's not my favorite lineup construction, just from a standpoint of, if you have all of the Bucks guys together, what's the game script where that ultimately ends up being optimal? It would have to be, where do Giannis, Middleton, Holiday all outscore Booker, Paul, and Ayton, and then the Bucks don't just totally blow out the game. So then I'd have to start thinking about some of the other players in the lineup. And let me just plug this in really quick. If we had, so we're saying Giannis and the captain in that lineup, maybe say Giannis captain. So Giannis
actually,
captain.
No, it was a matter of fact, it was Booker in the captain.
Okay.
Which makes at least a little bit more sense that if Booker goes crazy, the rest of Phoenix doesn't have, huge games, but it was Booker in the captain.
Okay, so I guess that makes a little bit more sense than from a game theory perspective. So you have Booker in the captain spot, and then you're hoping for like a 60, 65 fantasy point game out of Booker in an optimal scenario. Exactly. That would make sense. I thought they were going to like the three Bucks guys and then not playing the Suns high end guys.
No, it does make a bit more sense there. Look, the thing, Booker's a weird play, right? Among all of these guys at the top, Booker's almost the strangest because he has that easy 70 plus potential. He's got multiple games with 70 plus fantasy points, DraftKings points, as a matter of fact, in the postseason. But he also has games being a pretty scoring dependent player now that Chris Paul's healthy and soaking up a ton of these possessions and essentially running the offense. He's had a ton of games too, where you're looking at like 29, 27, 33, 35. Booker, if he gets hot, could rip off 40, 50 real points, right? But he also definitely has that floor that at his price point, you're not feeling great about. But I guess in a spot like this, where it's a showdown and, 200K up top or whatever it is, large field tournaments, even some of these large field single entries, Booker is the type of guy that you can throw in at captain and think, listen, if he has one of these games, that's what I'm looking for. It doesn't need to happen every game. If he has one of them, then you're going to be positioned really nice.
It's kind of interesting to look at his box score. So he had that 77 fantasy point game against the Clippers. And then, he busted up his nose after that. His fantasy production since then hasn't been great.
He had 175, the 175 game, didn't he?
That was before he broke his nose.
No. He had 2 games in the 70s. I'm saying, were they both before that?
Yeah. So since breaking his nose, his fantasy point totals 29, 29, 29, 45, 39, and 43.
Interesting. Yeah. The thing though is like, okay, so here's why I have a tough time looking at that being anything. he was lighting the Bucks up in the first quarter. And then Chris Paul kind of just took over. He shot poorly, 8 for 21 on the game. But there was a time there where you're looking at it like, if I don't have Booker in the captain spot, I'm losing everything tonight. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's just beyond that. So if he doesn't score, one of the issues too has been him on the court at the same time as Chris Paul. Beyond scoring, Devin Booker doesn't really offer all that much. And by the way, like Devin Booker, I think is obviously a fine fantasy play. I'm just questioning how high his upside is to have him in the captain spot relative to some of the other options. Like, I think I'd rather go to Chris Paul, Ayton. I'd rather go to Giannis. I'd rather go to Middleton in the captain spot. All guys who I think relative to their price points probably have more upside, because since Chris Paul's gotten back and been healthy, he's orchestrated the offense in such a way that Devin Booker, outside of scoring, just isn't really providing all that much. His peripheral stats in these other games, 5 assists, 0, 3, 4, 6 rebounds. He's been over 5 rebounds just once. And he doesn't really rack up that many defensive stats. So you're really dependent on scoring with Devin Booker. He had the game where he had, the triple double, obviously, but that was also a game where there was no Chris Paul playing. So, in general, and Paul's on the court, and we saw this a lot in the regular season too. Like, think back in the regular season, how often were any of us playing Devin Booker when Chris Paul was active? Almost never. And in the playoffs, a lot of the games that we've seen big spots from Devin Booker came when either Chris Paul was out because of COVID or because Chris Paul was dealing with a shoulder issue. So, there's clear upside in Devin Booker, but he's not a priority play for me at captain.
Eric Linkvist and I did the live before lock back last series, and I had asked him, I was like, man, when's the last time Devin Booker's had double-digit assists? Because it feels like forever. And I think he said he's done it. He went back and looked. He's done it like twice in the past calendar year or something like that. It just hasn't been there. And another thing, let me ask you this. When was the nose break game? Was that the 75 game?
That was the game before 75.
Okay. How many fantasy points per minute do you think he's averaging since that last 70 fantasy point game, a 75 fantasy point game? DraftKings points per minute, 77 DraftKings points per game.
Probably right around
1.9.
Yeah, it's not great.
It's not. And if you look at the touches on this team since then, Chris Paul, 84 touches per game, Devin Booker, 57. Now, that shouldn't be a shock, but even though Ayton's at 51, it shouldn't be a huge shock. But it's just pretty obvious that Devin Booker is scoring dependent right now. But I do think there's always that huge ceiling with Booker. It's just, how often are you going to achieve something like that? That's the question. And I think you're saying that's one of the reasons why you're not super high on him at captain. Who's your top captain right now?
So, all right, there's two ways to look at this. Just in terms of who I think is the best captain to play, just in terms of here's who's most likely to be optimal. It's Giannis. The problem is we have seen so many ties in showdown contests that I don't like. If you're somebody who plays a bunch of lineups, I don't know that you're very likely to profit if you play Giannis a whole bunch at captain, just because it'd be so hard to make unique lineups with him. I know I've had it to me times in the postseason. I've had times where I play a bunch of showdown lineups, and not even where I play like 150. I'd like 20 to 30. I've come in first place and lost money on slates because so many people tie for first place. So my priority is not to play Giannis a captain, even though I do think that he's the player most likely to end up in the optimal lineup as captain. I don't want to be in a position where I split with a bunch of people.
So then who would it be? Like, you have Giannis at, we'll talk 26% at captain, and obviously FanDuel is different at the MVP, just totally different format there. Booker's at like 16%. Again, ownership projections are free if you want to follow along over at awesemo.com. 14% Holiday, 12% Middleton, 10% Paul. Ayton's at 8.6%. Like, are any of these guys in spots where you really like that maybe they aren't getting as much ownership at captain as you think they should be?
I think it's all fair. All these guys are between, like 10 to 15%, DeAndre Ayton, 8.6% in the captain spot. And actually, I'm just going to refresh this to make sure we can get a fresh run of ownership. But in general, it seems all about fair to me where all these guys are. My actual preference here is just to take a crazy shot on a punt at captain, whether it be, Torrey Craig, Bryn Forbes. And the idea is behind one of these guys, they're landing in the optimal spot at captain. Like, I don't think Torrey Craig goes out and scores 40 fantasy points. I don't think Bryn Forbes scores 40 fantasy points. But what could happen is Devin Booker could score 50. Giannis could score 70. Chris Middleton could score 50. DeAndre Ayton could score 45. Chris Paul could score 50. If a bunch of those high-end guys have massive games, then the route to the optimal lineup is going to be having as many of those guys in lineup as possible. So relative to ownership, just trying to differentiate, that's where I'd go to somebody like Torrey Craig or Bryn Forbes in the captain spot, just so I get myself on a construction that's way different than everybody else.
So you're actually willing to go like full out punt at captain in spots today?
Yeah, I don't have an issue with it, especially because the Bucks production is so centered right now, especially with Giannis back now. So much of the usage and touches, it's Giannis, it's Drew Holiday, it's Chris Middleton. It's hard to reasonably see anybody else having a massive amount of upside on the Bucks team. Like we were even talking about, the potential for Pat Connaughton to play extra minutes before. The problem is Pat Connaughton's already playing a whole bunch of minutes. He doesn't do all that much with it when he's on the court. So Pat Connaughton now over the last 2 weeks, Pat Connaughton's playing 26 minutes per game and averaging 15.5 fantasy points. So what do we do? If we give Pat Connaughton 30 minutes, we're looking at like 17 fantasy points from him. So yeah, I really don't mind punting a captain. I think that's the best way to differentiate.
All right. Yeah. The usage and production is really heavily concentrated by 3 players in Milwaukee. And we were saying that earlier. It makes things a whole lot more difficult to look to the rest of this team and feel good about it. But there are going to be options there. We will talk about them. First, Greg, I want to get into this Dario Saric news. We got a couple super chats I'll hit on first, though. I did not forget about you guys. D-Niz says, high dollar DK, single entry, Booker and Craig or Ayton and Portis.
Let me see. Let me scroll back to find. Okay, so high dollar DK entry. Booker and Craig are 8 and 4. So that is Booker and Craig for me. And by the way, what's funny about this? Because I just saw somebody laughing at me for pushing Torrey Craig today. One, I don't think he's a bad play relative to price. I haven't projected pretty well. I will say the last time that I really liked Torrey Craig in a game, he wasn't even in the rotation. So yeah. that is definitely something I don't feel great about. But listen, he played minutes last game, and I think he's the guy who benefits the most from Dario Saric being out, just based on the rotations from last game. We saw Torrey Craig play 15 minutes. I think that he's fairly likely to play somewhere in the neighborhood of, 15 to 20 minutes again. So just considering his price and the minutes that I think he's going to play, I still like him in this spot. But yeah, the last time I really liked Torrey Craig, he wasn't in the rotation.
Yeah, like it's possible that he's not, and it's possible. No, he will be. I'd be shocked in a scenario like this if he isn't, and that's why we're going to talk Dario Saric as well. I understand it's not a ton of minutes that are voided here, but minutes are minutes right now. So all of that is worth discussing. Another thing too, Greg, bro, I get that. I got a buddy named Craig and I call him Greg all of the time. And I just mixed yours up as well. Greg did, and has been doing a prize pick video. It's super short form, like 3-4 minutes of all of his top prize picks. It's pre-recorded, nicely edited, everything put together, giving you rapid fire picks over there at PrizePicks. And since they are our partner for this show, they offer an awesome deposit bonus. If you haven't done so yet, you use the promo code Awesemo when you sign up to $100 and an entry into the free $1 million NBA playoffs challenge. If you haven't done that, use Greg's video. Use some of these. Are you going to be doing these 5 days a week now?
No, I've been doing them for a little while now, but not 5 days a week because there aren't NBA contests.
Well, I wasn't sure if you were doing baseball too.
No, I have to look at the schedule. Maybe I'll start doing them for baseball, but I've been doing them for basketball throughout the playoffs now. And one thing also is if you guys see the picks early in the day, one reason to also, if you want to play on PrizePicks, do it early. The lines move throughout the day on PrizePicks. It's not, they don't stay static. And of the players I liked this morning, all of the lines have moved since then. And even last week, the first game that Giannis was out, I had Bobby Portis over 17 fantasy points. And I think he closed at 33.5 or something like that. 27.5 was line. So it definitely is beneficial to try to get on these early. So I think if I remember correctly, the lines for the players I liked earlier today, it was Giannis over 52.5. Now he's at 53.5. It was Chris Middleton under 44.5. Now he's 43.5. And I like Jay Crowder over 18.5, and now he's at 19.5. So they do move throughout the day. So if you are interested in PrizePicks, it's most beneficial to get on the lines early before they move.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people in chat are talking about it all the time, saying talk more about PrizePicks. There are a lot of people that love playing it there. Look, it's daily player prop based contest. You don't have to worry about sharks, optimizers, mass multi-entry, none of that. Just pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 players available on the board. Go over or under their projected scores. You know how props work. If you correctly pick a 5-player lineup, you can net up to 10x your entry. fee. And also you got NBA, MLB, WNBA, NFL, and esports, and you can take advantage of their mixed sports entry feature. So if you feel confident about several props for different sports, mix them all into one. You can do it however you want. Download it in the App Store or the Google Play Store and make that first deposit using the promo code Awesemo, up to $100 deposit bonus when you sign up using the promo code Awesemo. Head over to PrizePicks today. All right, so let's get into this Dario Saric business. Probably only playing like 9 to 11 minutes, even before the ACL tear. Kaminsky came in and played 4 minutes. I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't play at all today, given that he hadn't been in the rotation for nearly a month, really the playoffs, and for most of the playoffs. And Torrey Craig, as you mentioned, you think benefits there. So I get it, Greg. It's not a ton of minutes that are being voided by Dario Saric, but it is backup center minutes, and someone's got to absorb them, whether it's Jay Crowder playing at the 5 and the Suns going smaller, or maybe Frank Kaminsky does get a little bit of 4, 5, 6 minutes of run. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that it's not that Torrey Craig is all of a sudden a lock to play massive minutes, but I think that this now solidifies Torrey Craig's role in the rotation to at least to the point where he plays some minutes, because we've seen his minutes, fluctuate all over the place in the playoffs. Look at the last 4 games, Torrey Craig's minutes, 0. That was the game I liked him. It was actually 0.3 minutes. He came in garbage time at the end of the game where he came to defend somebody on the last possession. So no minutes for Torrey Craig. Then he played 11, then he played 31 and actually closed the game against the Clippers over Bridges down the stretch. Then last game he ends up playing 16. So, I think just looking at the 16 minutes he played, that was the most outside of the wonky closing game against Clippers where he played 31. The 16 minutes for Torrey Craig was the most that he had played since June 6th in game 1 against the Nuggets. So with that in mind, I feel that this does increase the floor of Torrey Craig a little bit. And just given that the options at the bottom of the pricing today, they're all really tough to predict in terms of who's going to get what minutes. We have Torrey Craig, we have Frank Kaminsky, we have Bryn Forbes. And, of those guys, Jeff Teague being another one, Craig is a little bit more expensive. If I'm going below 2K, Forbes is my favorite. But if we're including Craig in that group, I feel best about his playing time.
Okay. Do you think Crowder gets any additional minutes out of this? Like, I know where we were talking earlier, you say Connaughton, there's not a lot of meat on the bone there for additional minutes, but Jay Crowder is the type of player that's a staple in this rotation already. There have been games where he's played more minutes than he gets normally. Like, could you see backup center run where Crowder goes from, say, 33 minutes per game to 37 tonight?
Potentially. It's going to depend also how well he shoots. Like, he's not going to go over from the field again, and that should help him. One of the issues here also, though, is I think this helps Cam Johnson a lot, but he's been priced up so aggressively on DraftKings that it's hard to reasonably get to him. So Cam Johnson was almost min price last game. Like, he was in the 2,000 price range, if I remember correctly. Man. Yeah, now he's unplayable. So, I mean, the real answer to who I think benefits the most from a playing time perspective is Cam Johnson, but he's 6,000. So that's one of the issues in terms of where the value comes from with Saric out, is that, maybe Frank Kaminsky plays, but maybe Frank Kaminsky doesn't either. He's 14% owned, which I think is probably about appropriate, just given that there's uncertainty. And number one, he might not be in the rotation. Even if he plays, is he going to play a lot of minutes? Then number two, Frank Kaminsky looked surprised to be on the court last game. He looked way out of shape for an NBA Finals game. He was like, I didn't think I was going to be. He was already set to be on vacation, Frank Kaminsky. Yeah. So like he wasn't. I didn't think he was ready to be playing last game. But I think 14% ownership for him is about appropriate. But yeah, the guy I think benefits the most is actually Cam Johnson from a minutes perspective. But he's at 6,000, which is an unplayable price tag.
Yeah, dude, I still think Crowder could, if you look at what the rotation looked like, not when Kaminsky came in and played those few minutes in the first half after Saric went down. Now, he didn't sub in immediately for Saric. Ayton came back in the first quarter, right? But it's almost like Monty Williams at halftime said, all right, here's what I want to do with this substitution. You don't have much time to think. You're thinking on your feet when a guy goes down. You're not prepared for that in the first quarter. But if you look at what happened in the second half, when Ayton went out, you had Crowder at the 5, you had Chris Paul, Cameron Payne, and then Cam Johnson and Torrey Craig. I wouldn't be shocked if Monty staggers them a little bit and Jay Crowder gets those minutes. Now, like you said, like we both said, is it significant enough? Maybe not. And if Ayton's playing 38 minutes. I'm not saying that brings Crowder from 33 to 43. What I am saying though, is I could see them just play it smaller, stagger him with DeAndre Ayton. And then Craig really benefits from this because he gets that run in the small ball lineups with Crowder at the 5.
Yeah, the two guys from the Suns on the cheaper end that I do think ultimately benefit and are playable on DraftKings at their price points as strong plays. It is Jay Crowder as one, and then Torrey Craig as the other. The other thing too with Crowder is, we've seen this a lot in the playoffs. Guys have bad games and everybody's just like, oh, this guy sucks now. He's unplayable. People want to trade Ben Simmons now for, for literally nothing. Yep. Right. So, I mean, people are talking about Ben Simmons like he's Kyle Kuzma now when he's talking about in the media. Like, people want no part of him. Ben Simmons is not that bad of a player. And now, like, I've already seen people in the YouTube chat bring it up. Like, hey, Jay Crowder can't shoot. It's like, all right, well, Jay Crowder shot 39% from 3 in the regular season this year. He shot 40% from 3 in the regular season last year. During his time with the Heat, the 20 games he played for Miami, he shot 45% from 3. So, yeah, like, Jay Crowder can absolutely shoot. And just because he has one game where he doesn't make shots, people want nothing to do with him. So to me, I think that Jay Crowder warrants being rostered at a higher than, let's see, what is his current ownership? Is like 30%. 41%. Actually, that's about fair. I think it was lower when I looked earlier. But either way, in his price range, I do think that Jay Crowder stands out as a strong play. There's nobody really priced around him other than Cam Johnson, and Crowder's a much better projected play for me.
Willie Hoop says, these guys pick unimportant issues like Saric minutes to spend needless discussion time rather than talking about defensive matchups for the game and any impact. Look, if this were the regular season or even earlier in the postseason, I would agree with you 100%, right? 10 minutes from Saric, pretty meaningless. 10, 11 minutes from Saric in a game where Bryn Forbes is in tournament winning lineups with 7.5 fantasy points, it's actually really important to break this down. Because if Torrey Craig remains in the rotation and plays 17, 18 minutes today, or Crowder gets additional minutes, or Cam Johnson gets additional minutes, you might only soak up additional 4 or 5 minutes if you're an individual player. That is significant in a finals game where there is a dearth of options at the bottom. That's all.
Without a doubt. And then the other thing too is, because the pricing is different for Showdown sites, and this is also going to be different FanDuel versus DraftKings. I think we should bring that up also, because if somebody's playing on FanDuel, getting 8 minutes out of Frank Kaminsky isn't going to do anything for you at the kind of pricing structure, the way that FanDuel works. But for DraftKings, because the min price is so much different than what it is for regular contests. And by the way, the players on the high end are priced more generally also. It's not like we usually see Chris Paul priced at 10,400 on classic sites. We don't usually see Chris Middleton priced at 9,800. So with that in mind, then also on the low end, we never see guys priced at 1,000. So if Frank Kaminsky actually does play 12 minutes, he's going to be in the optimal lineup. I don't think that's what's going to happen. But yeah, what happens to those minutes is very, very important for this slate.
Michael Ladeau says, is Torrey Craig in value with Paul in Optima? Assuming optimal. I don't know what you mean there, dude. Try and rephrase that. Thanks for the super chat, and I'll get to it in a bit. But I'm not necessarily sure what you mean by that. And hey, we are.
I think I understand, by the way.
Okay, you can if you would like. You can try and decode this. Yeah.
So he wants to know if Torrey Craig is a value play. Yes, I think Torrey Craig is a good value play. And then Chris Paul by optimal, I think he means Chris Paul in the captain spot.
But so Chris Paul. Oh, okay. Because it says with Chris Paul in optimal. You're saying that. Okay, I get you. Well, maybe that's right.
Yeah. Listen, also, who knows? I could be translating on the internet incorrectly. Correct. Yeah. Listen, but I speak DFS, right? These are my people. Chris
but
Paul.
That was not DFS speak.
That kind of was. It was DFS Slack chat speak.
That's fair. But anyway, thanks for the super chat. If you re-ask that question, Jordan, try and find that, and we will try and crack the code. Okay.
But anyway, I think Torrey Craig is a very good value play. Chris Paul is my favorite pay up option from the Suns today.
All right. Makes sense to me. Hey, we are 63 away from 400 likes. If you haven't hit that, you forgot to earlier, we're not going to hold it against you. But if you like the show, do us that solid. Get us to 400 likes here on the show. We're about 20 minutes until lock. I promise you we will take your questions as we draw closer for sure, especially if you've got the badge, if you're a team member here, or if you're a premium member in Slack. over there, awesemo.com/join. If you want to get in on it, use the promo code NBA Live Before Lock, all one word, all caps, NBA Live Before Lock. You'll get 25% off the first week of Awesemo Plus. Every single thing on the site: ownership, player projections, top stack tool, boom bust tool, lineup builder. And this is for everything: PGA, MMA, NASCAR, esports. We got tennis right now, which if you use tennis DFS as a promo code, you get the whole month, all projections for $1 single. I know I'm throwing a lot at you. We got a ton going on over there. All these tools built and used by Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, #1 ranked DFS player in the world. He's won a lot of money doing this. And if you want to do a weekly pass, just Showdown stuff too on NBA and in some other, all of our Showdown content. We had an absurd amount of avatars with the Awesemo avatar taking down that chop the other day in game 1 in the Millie Maker. So go to awesemo.com/join. Check out the offers that we have. If you feel like joining, that'd be awesome. Be sure to jump in the premium Slack chat when you do join the community, and the premium Slack chat office hours is awesome. You got the pros from Awesemo answering your questions, helping you better your game as a DFS player every day of the week. So check it out, awesemo.com/join. And if you have questions, my DMs on Twitter are open. I'm happy to answer them for you. All right. Let's talk. Let's dig into this a little bit further, Greg. The rotation breakdown. I think we've pretty much tackled all of that for the most part. But just in summation, to put a bow on this, how do you see the Suns rotation shaking out today, with a small shakeup in the front court for anyone that might have tuned in late? Just quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking pretty heavily at what they did in game 1, and I think that's what they're going to run in game 2. Don't forget, Dario Saric, while he tore his ACL, he did it very early in the game. So we barely saw Saric out on the court. Saric only ended up playing 2 minutes. So ultimately, I gave those 2 minutes to Frank Kaminsky, which then puts Frank Kaminsky at 6 minutes. He played 4 minutes last game, and a little bit of volatility there. Frank Kaminsky played 0 minutes. That wouldn't be a shock. Kaminsky plays 10 minutes. That wouldn't be a shock either. That's what makes him, a highly volatile punt option, but would be in play for a low percentage of lineups. But beyond that, I think the minutes are going to kind of shake out the same. We saw 16 minutes from Torrey Craig. That makes him, to me, one of the stronger value plays here. We saw Cam Johnson play over 20 minutes. The problem is that he's been priced up in such a way that I don't think he's playable today on DraftKings. And then, beyond that, all the guys are going to play the normal minutes. DeAndre Ayton played 39 minutes last game. I don't see DeAndre Ayton all of a sudden playing 45 or anything like that. So, with that in mind, I think the value play that makes the most sense from the Saric injury is Torrey Craig.
Okay. Dive a little bit more into some punts here as well. There aren't a ton that really stand out, but there are more than we've seen on other days. I mean, there have been times where just recently where some of these punts are pretty just exclusively limited to 1 or 2 guys. Today, and I'm talking like punts, you have Bryn Forbes, and I'm not asking you to be excited about these guys, but again, they can be in tournament winning lineups. They were just the other day with 7 fantasy points. You have Bobby Portis, Cameron Payne, Torrey Craig. And if you want to go a little bit higher, you can throw PJ Tucker, Pat Connaughton in there. Who would you say your favorite punts are today, whether at captain, which you talked about maybe being a little bit different there? I do know you like Craig, but also in the utility spots, whether on DraftKings or FanDuel.
All right. So, I mean, starting with the DraftKings side, if I'm looking at one of the Bucks guys, it is Bryn Forbes I like the most for a couple of reasons. Number one, I just think that of the cheap Bucks guys, it's really, it's Bryn Forbes, it's Jeff Teague. I think that there's more upside in Bryn Forbes. We've seen him get hot at times in the postseason. It doesn't happen all that often, but we've seen Bryn Forbes go out and hit a bunch of threes really quickly, gets himself a couple extra minutes. So if you're going to anybody under 2K, that's where I think Forbes makes the most sense. Moving over to FanDuel for the cheap options, the pricing is so much different over on FanDuel. I would lean towards, does Mikal Bridges count as a punt at 9,000?
Yeah, well, I'd say, yeah, why not? I mean, he's down there with Connaughton and Cameron Johnson for the most part. He's cheaper than Bobby Portis and Cameron Payne. Yeah, why not?
So in terms of the utility spot, I think that Mikal Bridges is the guy who's picking up. He's the most favorable play relative to his ownership on FanDuel. Bridges is just not priced correctly at 9,000. So one of the main reasons that I think we've seen Bridges get priced down a little bit over on FanDuel is it's still a reaction to what happened to him 2 games ago. So that game against the Clippers, he didn't close the game. They went with Torrey Craig closing. He only played 24 minutes. But overall, we've seen Mikal Bridges minutes fairly consistently in like the 28 to 32 range. So I think the minutes are going to be fine for Bridges in the series. He played 30 minutes last game. So just given that his price point is at 9,000, you compare him to the other players that are priced under 10K on FanDuel today. It's Bridges at 9,000, and then you're comparing him to PJ Tucker, Pat Connaughton, Cam Johnson. Those are the guys in the same price range as him. And I think Bridges projects out a lot better. So Bridges, I think, warrants being in more than 24% of lineups in the utility spot.
Yeah, no doubt about it, especially given he's cheaper than a lot, than a lot of these other guys that he probably shouldn't be. A couple super chats here that I think will be valuable to everybody watching the show as well. Many people have similar questions. Ty G said with a 420 super chat. Thanks, Ty. Middleton and Craig or Holiday and Payne on DraftKings. Middleton, Craig, or Holiday, Payne?
That is Middleton and Craig for me. So, Holiday, you talked about him earlier in terms of his numbers and how much he's seen a dip when Giannis is on the court. The same goes for Chris Middleton. However, Middleton has had more upside in the playoffs playing alongside Giannis. We've seen times where Middleton's gone off. He's closed games in the fourth quarter. He's been the go-to guy. And we've seen Middleton, ultimately spark more upside than Holiday. So he's a preferred showdown play for me. And then Torrey Craig, relative to price, I like more than Payne.
All right. Michael is rephrasing his question. Giannis captain in 2 optimal lineups. That's where you're going wrong, Michael. We can talk about that later. One with Craig and Paul, the other with Holiday and Connaughton, Middleton and both. So I guess the question is Craig, Paul, or Holiday, Connaughton?
All right. Yeah. So this is probably the most complicated way I've ever been asked a 2v2 question.
Yeah, it's tough.
I think because that's ultimately what this is. It's a 2v2.
Oh, it's a 2v2. So forget about Giannis at captain. Forget about Middleton and both. Isolate the middle part of this question.
Yeah. So that is Chris Paul and Torrey Craig for me because I prefer Chris Paul to Drew Holiday and then Torrey Craig versus Pat Connaughton. I think it's pretty close, but I still prefer Craig to Connaughton relative to price. Actually, it's funny because I don't think he meant it this way, although maybe he did. I think also having Giannis and Middleton already in the lineup also gives me a reason to want to play Chris Paul over Drew Holiday.
All right. It's all good, man. He said, sorry, guys. It's all good, man.
Oh, no.
We're just trying to figure this one out. Appreciate the support. And Doans, what's up, brother? He says Holiday and Ayton he's zeroed out with Holiday, Ayton, or Middleton, Lopez, and leave $600. The approach of leaving money on the table can be really valuable in showdown slates, Greg. Now, it obviously depends on what game it is, what players you're talking about, and whether or not it's viable at all. But I think his big question is should I be zeroing out Holiday, Ayton, or Middleton, Lopez with 600, or should I even be worried about that? For me, it's Holiday, Ayton, even zeroed out. But I don't know what the size of the field is. I don't know who's at captain. It's tougher that way when you don't know the context of the lineup.
I've been making a lot of lineups in Fantasy Crunch where I don't even allow it to make showdown lineups for DraftKings that have $0 left over. It's going to
Craig at captain. Does it matter if you're zeroing out when you've gone crazy contrarian at a captain spot?
But how do you know he is Craig at captain?
I don't. That's why I'm saying without context, it's harder to answer the question.
Yeah. But I mean, in general, though, I've still been building lineups where I don't have it, because if you have lineups that use all of the salary, it's going to be duped a bunch of times. I don't think there are really unique lineups to have that have $0 left over. The other thing to consider too is you brought up Torrey Craig at captain. So here's something I noticed with showdown slates a little bit earlier in the year. Even if you're playing a contrarian guy at captain, and let's say you're getting Torrey Craig at, whatever 1% projected ownership. If you just fill in all of the guys that use the rest of the salary that makes sense, almost every single person that has the 1% of lineups of Torrey Craig at captain are going to have that same lineup. So it seems unique, but it ultimately is not really that unique because everybody that's playing that particular guy at captain ends up playing that same sort of lineup. So for me personally, I don't like building showdown lineups on DraftKings that leave that they use up all the salary.
So you would go Middleton, Lopez there?
Yeah, I mean, also, like you said, there's a little more context needed in terms of
what tournament is
is this a tournament? Is it a cash game? But yeah, I'd say Middleton, Lopez, just because I don't like the idea of using all the salary on DraftKings.
Okay, there you have it. So what have we got left? I think we've hit on most of this. I want to make sure we get you guys everything possible to be ready for this. We're about 10 minutes to lock. Then we're going to hit on some of our top props as well. We're also only 54 likes away from 500. So 500 would be a real nice mark. Again, not expecting to get to 1,000 again like the other day. That was insane. But 500 would leave me walking out of my studio at night with a pretty good feeling. Thanks, guys, in advance. I know we'll get there. All right, cash game and GPP. When we do this topic, this segment, it's very simple. Greg, dude, this is I don't know why I keep calling you Greg.
Hey, listen, we're talking about Torrey Craig. Maybe it's a sign.
That's got to be what it is.
It's got. We'll blame it on Torrey Craig.
I've never done it before in a single show that we've done. I've never done it before, but today it's a problem. Very unprofessional of me. Anyway, Greg, the simple thing here is cash game GPP. What's the one biggest difference you'll have in lineups if you're playing cash or playing tournaments tonight? One spot that, I mean, I'm assuming it's the fact that you're going to go wild with the captain spot in some of these tournaments, whereas in cash, you're likely getting a Giannis or a Paul or a Middleton.
Yeah. I mean, if you're playing cash games, you play Giannis at captain. There's nothing else to put thought into. Also, I don't play cash games at all for Showdown contest, but if I was to play a cash game, it would be Giannis a captain for a couple of reasons. Number one, he has the most upside of anybody in this game. He's the best fantasy producer by a pretty wide margin, but it's also what the field is doing, and there's no need to try to differentiate in a cash game. So just the fact that in GPPs, Giannis is projected for 2x the ownership in the captain spot compared to everybody else, you're just playing Giannis at captain, and that's where you start your lineup.
Okay. Fair enough. There are still people that Huddy says Torrey Craig. That's what I suspect. There are people that are still playing cash games in Showdown. I'm not one of them, but yeah, I hear you. Let's talk about some top props here. This is always fun. Try and do it towards the end of the show so we get all of the DFS stuff in first. Now, Mike Peterson, your show is so good. The earth is shaking out here in California. Yeah, I saw you had a 5.9 earthquake just not long ago. Jordan, did you feel it? No, I thought that's why I could only see half your head. Your camera just flooded up. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah, not great. But I try and do props here later in the show and then questions so we can get everybody tuned up first or ready. And let's hit on these. I'm going to go over to oddshopper.com, totally free. I love this site. And you should love it too. You can shop odds from all of the different books. You can create a watch list. You can track all of your bets. You even have, NBA, NFL, all of the NFL player futures, team futures that'll be up when they're up. A lot of them are already up there, but check it out. It's very cool. And my favorite part is you can search player props by name. So if you just want to put a name in instead of scrolling down on all these other books to find it, boom, right there, pops right up. Greg, I'll hit it first. I'll tell you what I got. The first one, and I'm assuming we may have some disagreement here, but I'm going Jrue Holiday under 34.5 points, rebounds, and assists. I think it actually moved to 33.5, but just generally speaking, recently he hasn't been hitting that pretty much at all. But more than that, his rates are just really, really low with Giannis on the floor. I think Giannis plays more than the 35 minutes he played in game one. And if that's the case, that means even less minutes for Jrue Holiday on the floor without Giannis. 34.5, even 33.5. You might even get the under at plus money. I don't think you will, though. I think it'll probably be right around 110, 115. You can check that out at Odd Shopper. That's one for me that I'm hitting. What are you going with? What's one of your favorite props tonight?
Yeah, so I agree with you on Jrue Holiday. I'm just looking at my projection for him, and I gave Jrue Holiday a lot more minutes than most other people in the industry, just considering, number one, just the overall, they're down 1-0 in the series. Also, they struggled so much to defend Devin Booker at the start of last game, and then Chris Paul so down the stretch, that I gave Jrue Holiday a little bit more minutes today. And even then I have him for 31.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. So yeah, I don't mind that call at all. Let me go to our NBA props and let's see what are the most recent numbers, because I assume they've probably changed a little bit since we've started. Bobby Portis has a player prop of 6.5 points. I like the under on 6.5 for Bobby Portis. I'm just not sure how many minutes he's ultimately going to end up playing today. Even in last game where we saw Brook Lopez not play that much, Bobby Portis still ended up playing 14 minutes. And you look at how he's been utilized in the playoffs, just beyond some of the games where even when Giannis was active and everybody was healthy. He had those 2 big games where he started, played 35 and 32 minutes. But beyond that, we haven't seen Bobby Portis play really big minutes. 14 minutes last game. I don't think that he's the solution to defend the Suns pick and roll. So I don't think Bobby Portis plays a massive amount of minutes today. He's okay as a DFS option just because, 8 minutes of Bobby Portis could mean 10 fantasy points or something like that. And that could be enough to land him in an optimal lineup. But in general, I'll take the under on Portis's points.
Okay, let's rapid fire one more for both of us here. I'm going Chris Paul over 1.5 threes. He's been a 40% 3-point shooter on the season. He's averaging 6.2 threes per game over his last 5 starts. And even in the ones where he was 0 for 6, he's still jacked up 6 threes. He's 11 for 15 over his last 2 games. I don't anticipate that holding. I mean, it's just not sustainable, but his usage has been up dramatically recently. He's just doing a ton of ball handling, getting off a ton of shots. And if he does anything like he's been doing in recent games, I think he cruises over 1.5 threes today. I also think 8 and 16.5 points is an interesting one. If these books are allowing for live props on someone like Ayton, see what Mike Budenholzer does defensively here. It might be a very good opportunity to take an over or an under there, depending on what type of adjustments or lack thereof they've made to start or get midway through this game, even after the first quarter. You got one more for us, Greg?
Yeah, so I have Jay Crowder over 9.5 points. So Jay Crowder, who did not shoot the ball well at all last game. In fact, he made 0% of his field goals. I like a little bit of positive regression. I think he makes more than 0% of his shots today. I have Jay Crowder projected for about 12.5 points. So the over 9.5, I think, is a pretty good look.
Okay, boom, 500 likes. Thanks, you guys. Thank you very much. Now it's time to take your questions. Malcolm with the super chat. Drew or Ayton at Pro Spot for FanDuel cash? Drew or Ayton, Pro Spot, FanDuel cash?
Let me see, what is the difference in there? Yeah, that's going to be Drew Holiday for me. I have Holiday projected for slightly more fantasy points. The other thing with Ayton also is, even though he's played really well in the postseason, he was really good last game, we've still seen a higher floor in general from Drew Holiday that compared to DeAndre Ayton. So, we only have to go back to the second to last game of the series against the Clippers, where it feels like DeAndre Ayton has crushed every game, but he scored 29 fantasy points in that game. There's been a handful of games in the playoffs where he scored under 30 fantasy points.
Sub 1 fantasy point per minute, actually.
Yeah, and as much as Drew Holiday has struggled when Giannis has been on the court, the last time that Drew Holiday scored under 30 fantasy points was... Boy, I was scrolling really far back here. It was game 3 against the Nets. So June 6th. So it's been a while. The floor for Drew Holiday considered to be greater than the floor for Ayton for cash purposes.
For sure. Yeah. Less than a fantasy point per minute. Charles in Slack chat. Like I said, premium Slack chat. Always want to get to your guys' questions. Yeah. Giannis is captain in cash games. Totally makes sense. Let's see here. William had one and I can't find it. I'm looking. Portis or Forbes for DraftKings quickly.
That's Portis. If we're just comparing the two, and price isn't an issue.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. We got anything else here? Will it be good stuff and best ball? Thanks, Cleveland. Yeah, glad you enjoyed some best ball content. We're going to be doing a lot of that at the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. Come join, subscribe, hang out with us. Help us build that community over there. Ton of fantasy football stuff. I think that's it, Greg. I'll see if we got one more question in here for anybody that is looking. CP3 or Booker. I don't know which site, but just in a vacuum, who do you like here?
CP3.
You do? Booker, Craig, or Ayton Portis? Booker, Craig, or Ayton Portis?
Booker and Craig.
Okay. Manny C. Laffy, you have your 9 p.m. face on, brother. Thanks for all your efforts in sacrifice football as well with you and the family. Yeah, it's been a long day, man. 2 shows, 2 videos, an article, but look, I wouldn't rather be doing anything else. I love hanging out with you guys, hanging out with Greg here, and leading you all the way up to lock. Thanks, Dylan. Appreciate you. Appreciate all of you guys hanging out with us. Anything to add, to throw out there before we head out for the night, Greg?
Let's go, Suns.
Let's go, Sanjay. You got a lot riding on it. All right. We'll see you guys back here soon. Be sure to screenshot whatever you got at Awesemo HOF. Get that free month. You got to have the Awesemo avatar, though. Get that Awesemo avatar wherever you're playing. Finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more. Get $100 value Awesemo Plus for the entire month. If you want to throw that Fantasy Cruncher add-on, you can do that as well. Jeff Williams, bro, it's 9 o'clock, man. You just super chatted us. Can we refund it? I don't even think you can. If I can, I will. Crowder at captain, idiotic or genius on DK. Oh, you know what? He doesn't need that back. He's in the 555. I'm just kidding. I think he's not asking whether or not he should do it. He's just asking if he made a good decision or not. Crowder at captain, idiotic or genius on DK in the 555. Greg,
I'll let him know tomorrow. Tweet at me, and I'll give you an answer 24 hours from now whether it was idiotic or genius.
Good luck, Jeff. Appreciate you. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you soon. This has been the Awesemo Live Before Lock NBA edition presented by PrizePicks. Jordan already cued the music. We out.